The very first episode of Radiant Radish Reviews is sponsored by Perrier. Try seltzer. Once you have an acquired taste for it, it's pretty good. Try it. Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of Radiant Radish Reviews with your host, Radiant Radish himself. And for my very first episode, I've chosen an album that is slightly related to the namesake of my channel. So I thought it'd be fitting to pay my respects to that. So the Radiant Radish was actually a health food store opened by Brian Wilson, lead singer and creative force behind the Beach Boys. And he was going through a little bit of a health freak phase when he was making the Smile project and Smiley Smile. There's a song called Vegetables. And so he opened a health food store in Los Angeles, I believe, and it didn't fare so well. It only lasted for a couple of years. But then, I guess he didn't really have much of a business sense and it went under. But it was run by him, Brian himself, his cousin, and a road manager. But anyway, I thought it was a really cool name, and I thought I'd pay my respects to Brian and his health food store. So I named my channel after it. Thank you, Brian. But our first album in the series is going to be Smiley Smile. Not to be confused with the Smile Project, which I'll talk a little bit about. So to get into that, Smile was a 1966 album that never came to be. It exists now with demos, and also has a 2004 release that Brian by himself released, in his old age with the help of some younger musicians. But anyway, Smile was this very ambitious 1966 project that was supposed to be the greatest album of all time, the greatest rock and roll album of all time, whatever you want to call it. The album featured classical music, ragtime music, old country music. It had everything on it, and it was a very ambitious project. You can actually listen to it now. You can find them on Spotify, YouTube. And the cool thing about the Smile Project is, even though it was never finished, unless you want to call the 2004 finished version, the actual version of it, you can rearrange the album in any order, and it still technically makes sense, because the album didn't follow a linear storyline. It was more of like a concept of flashbacks, the songs, so they can really be arranged in any order. And I've seen many different ideas of the album's listings. One of my personal favorites that I would recommend checking out if you're interested is the Smile Sessions Purple Chick version. Strange name, but they edited some of the songs, and that was just my favorite version I've heard so far. I was perusing through a lot of them, but I thought that one was cool. A little bit back to the Smile Project and why it failed. There were a couple of reasons why it failed. Brian was using a lot of psychedelics at the time, and it just got to be too much for him. He was abusing them. He was taking cocaine, using all kinds of drugs, and with that, adding on to the disapproval of some of his band members, especially Mike Love, who weren't exactly interested and invested in moving away from the Beach Boys character act of a surf group. They didn't fully support Brian's new artsy direction. But also there were a couple other factors during one of the recordings for a song called Fire, Mrs. O'Leary's Cow. A house or something down the street burned down while they were working on it, and Brian felt responsible for it since he was working on a song called Fire and had everyone wearing fire helmets. He felt guilty for it, and that just really brought him down. Something else that also caused the Smile Project to fail was the competition with the Beatles. In 1967, the slotted year of release for the Smile Project, the Beatles released Sgt. Pepper's, ranked as the greatest album of all time by Rolling Stone magazine. And Smile was supposed to be bigger than Sgt. Pepper's, but Smile wasn't ready to be released yet, and so Sgt. Pepper's came out first. And it's hard to say what could have been. There are people that believe, that Smile would have been the greatest album of all time, but it wasn't released, so we don't know. I personally think it definitely would have been up there with Sgt. Pepper's had it been released in due time, but it wasn't. And so Brian heard some of the tracks off of Sgt. Pepper's and was completely devastated, and he felt like he couldn't compete. He always felt like he was competing with the Beatles, and so ultimately the album crumbled. So we're left with Smiley Smile, which is what we get instead of the big ambitious Smile project. And for that, Smiley Smile is often viewed as a very disappointing album. Didn't really get great reviews. It confused fans. One of the worst selling Beach Boys album it might actually be. And however, without considering the Smile sessions and just looking at this album by itself, this is definitely one of my favorite albums that I own in my collection, actually. This album features a lot of Smile material, original Smile material, but, you know, it has a different sound to it, and the album overall just has a different feel, obviously, than the Smile project. And so this album was released in '67, in the summer of '67, after Sgt. Pepper's. But it's a good album, and I'm going to get into the tracks now. Okay, so the album starts with Heroes and Villains, which was like the centerpiece of Smile. It's a song about... Smile had a lot to do with, you know, Americana themes about settlers coming over and they're interacting, genocide basically, with the Indians. And the first song, Heroes and Villains, like I said, was the centerpiece of the Smile project. And it has that that Smile type of style to it. It's like comedic, even though it's dealing with like serious issues. Very cool song. Some very cool little vocal interplay. But this song, in my opinion, along with Good Vibrations, which is actually on this record, two great songs, but they just don't really fit on this album. They're too overproduced as compared to the rest of the material on here. I'm sort of confused as to why they didn't do a more bare bones version of those two songs for this album, because the rest of this album is very lo-fi and kind of lacks instrumentation, but that kind of gives this album a strength that it pulls that off well. But these songs, they just feel like they don't really belong, and I feel like it kind of hurts the album, and it just sort of messes up the vibe of the album for me. But I still love this album. So it starts off with Heroes and Villains, a cool song. There are many different versions of this song, and Al Jardine of the Beach Boys has expressed that he doesn't really like the final, you know, cut that made it on the record. He thinks that Brian at the last second sort of tweaked it and, you know, made a detriment to the song. It's not as good as it could have been. But anyway, getting past that, we move on to Vegetables, which is known as Vegetables on the Smile project. And these two versions, the one on here and the one on Smile, differ greatly. And when you compare them, this one, yeah, it seems a lot more watered down and much more boring. But if you're looking at it through the lens of this album, and you're listening, this is an album that I think you need to listen all the way through. It's definitely its own unique version. Like I said, it's not as the Smile songs are a lot more like cheery, and it has this really bright piano in a lot of the songs, whereas this song is just more bassy. But this version is cool. One of my favorite tracks on the album. It's a cool song because, you know, it can double as a drug song. But Brian also said he wanted to encourage people to eat healthy and do it without being like arrogant, and it's just like a fun. It's like a fun song, so it's like
kind of like a kid's song.
The Smile version actually has Paul McCartney chewing celery on it, so that's kind of cool. But I guess he didn't make it onto this version. But oh well. So cool song, and it has this really cool bridge in the middle that's like super psychedelic. Listen for that. Okay, and next is Fall Breaks and Back to Winter, Woody Woodpecker's Symphony, which is an instrumental, and it borrows greatly from Mrs. O'Leary's Cow, the fire song from the fire element from the Smile project. And however, this song is not much different, but it varies from the fire song. So it's cool in its own unique way. And at first, it was kind of just like, yeah, you know, an instrumental track, really not that exciting. But it's actually become one of my favorite songs on the album. It's like very dark and it's creepy and abrupt, but it's also kind of serene and interesting. It's just like a nice little contradiction. But cool song. I recommend giving it a chance. And next we have one of my favorite tracks on this album, She's Going Bald, which is an adaptation of He Gives Speeches from the Smile project. And it features the same chorus melody, but with different lyrics, a completely different storyline. It's basically just a song about a guy narrating a girl losing her hair, which sounds pretty creepy and cryptic, but it's told in a comedic way, like the Smile way. And it's just a very funny, interesting song, and it has this pretty wild part in it where their voices, the pitches of their voices just rises into this crescendo until it reaches this little narrative interplay. But then, anyway, moving on past that song, great song, we have Little Pad, which is definitely the most chill song on this album, sung by Carl. And this song is pretty sparse instrumentation-wise, but it has like a little Hawaiian guitar strumming along, and some great vocal melodies, probably the best on the album. Definitely was one of my favorite songs at first. My hype for it died down a little bit, but definitely a great song. I think most people would definitely think this is one of the better songs, especially because it's not in the Smile project at all, so you're getting a brand new song. And so that's it for side one. And side two kicks it off with Good Vibrations. Obviously one of the best songs of all time, you know, amongst fans at least. But the problem for me is this was at the time when the single was released, the most expensive single of all time. It cost like $50,000, and it just doesn't fit well amongst all these other lo-fi produced songs. It just seems too grandiose, and it just doesn't really fit. So next is With Me Tonight, which is a great song that's sung by Carl, and just kind of a sweet little song. It has that like dark Smiley Smile feel to it, but a great song. Don't really have too much else to say about it. And then Wind Chimes. This is where Smiley Smile's strength comes in on this song as compared to Smile. I think the version on this album is far superior to the one on Smile. I don't think they had it figured out, or it just didn't fit that album like lyrically and musically. It works much better in the dark type of atmosphere of this album. It's just too cheery and it doesn't sound good. The lyrics don't really seem to match the music as well in Smile, at least in my opinion. And just a song that you can really visualize a couple guys just hanging out, listening to wind chimes. But it kind of has this foreboding feeling through it, and then eventually there's just this really creepy sound that rings out, and it kind of just throws you off. So a little bit of a cryptic song. And next is Getting Hungry, which is definitely a bright spot on this album. Pretty high energy song. It varies between these quiet verses where you can almost not really hear what they're saying. Pretty angsty song, just kind of your basic rock song about your want for a woman. So it's just got a lot of energy in it. I really like this song, and some cool instrumentation during the chorus. And next is Wonderful, which is sung by Carl again, and this was on the Smile project also. And I think this one is in par also with the one released on that album. Like I said, it doesn't feature that bright piano style that's on Smile, but it works well in the format of this album. And the song, I think, is about a girl, you know, a girl who has a strong faith in God, and she loses her virginity to a non-believer. I don't know, you can figure this one out for yourself. I'm not too sure about it. But cool song. The album ends with Whistlin', which isn't too much of anything. Just, hey, we were here. And hope you enjoyed the album. And that is it for my first review. I'm not going to ask you to subscribe or like, you know, but if you did like it, you know, I guess if that's what you want to do, you can do that. Thank you. This has been Radiant Radish Reviews with my first episode, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any requests, I will try to fill them, and I would love to fill them.